My sister got a brand new $117,000 Lexus LX for Christmas with a massive gold bow. I got a $5 mug. Mom smiled and said, "Be grateful. Life is fair." Around 2 a.m., I left my surprise and walked out. Next morning, Mom lost her mind. Christmas morning arrived with snow falling gently outside the windows of my parents' sprawling estate in Connecticut. I'd driven 3 hours from my apartment in Boston to be here, navigating icy roads and holiday traffic because family traditions matter to me. My sister Ashley had flown in from Miami with her hedge fund manager boyfriend Tyler, staying in the guest house that had better amenities than my entire living space. The inequality between us had always existed, but I'd learned to manage my expectations over the years. Ashley was the golden child, the one who'd married well at 23 and divorced even better at 26. She had a trust fund that could sustain a small country. Meanwhile, I worked 60-hour weeks as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm, proud of what I'd built without handouts. My parents, Lorraine and Kenneth, had made their fortune in commercial real estate development. They owned half of downtown Hartford and had their fingers in projects across New England. Growing up, I'd watch them shower Ashley with everything while I received the leftovers of their attention and resources. When Ashley wanted to go to NYU, they paid the full tuition without blinking. When I got accepted to Boston University, they told me student loans would teach me responsibility. Christmas had always been the most visible display of their favoritism. Last year, Ashley received a diamond tennis bracelet worth $30,000. I got a gift card to Target for $200. The year before that, she got a trip to Paris. I got a blender. But this year was going to be different. I could feel it when I walked into the house on Christmas Eve and saw my mother's barely contained excitement. She kept glancing at Ashley with this knowing smile, the kind that made my stomach twist with familiar dread. "Tomorrow is going to be so special," Lorraine said, squeezing Ashley's hand across the dinner table. "Just wait until you see what we have planned." My father Kenneth sat at the head of the table, cutting his prime rib with the precision of a surgeon. He hadn't asked me a single question about my life since I'd arrived. No inquiries about my recent promotion at work or the marathon I'd finished in October. Ashley dominated every conversation, talking about her new interior design business that our parents had funded to the tune of $500,000. "The penthouse project in Coral Gables is almost done," Ashley said, showing everyone photos on her phone. "The client is obsessed with what we've done with the space." I pushed my mashed potatoes around my plate and wondered why I kept coming back here. Year after year, I subjected myself to this theater of dysfunction because some part of me still hoped things would change. That hope was about to die a spectacular death. Christmas morning began with mimosas and fresh pastries in the sunroom. The tree in the living room stood 12 feet tall, decorated by professionals who'd spent 2 days making it look like something from a magazine spread. Presents were piled underneath in artfully arranged chaos. We opened gifts one by one, as was tradition. Ashley went first, naturally. She unwrapped a Cartier watch from our parents that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Then came designer handbags, cashmere scarves, and a first-edition book she'd mentioned wanting during some conversation I hadn't been part of. My turn came and went quickly. I opened a coffee mug from Home Goods with a generic "World's Best Daughter" printed on it. The price tag was still stuck to the bottom. $5.99. I held it in my hands and felt something inside me crack. "We thought you'd like that," Lorraine said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You drink so much coffee at that office of yours." I managed a thank you that tasted like ashes in my mouth. Ashley glanced at me with something that might have been pity or smugness. I couldn't tell anymore. Then my father stood up with a dramatic flourish that made my skin crawl. He had the demeanor of a man about to reveal a grand surprise, the kind that would be talked about for years. "Ashley, darling, your mother and I have one more gift for you," Kenneth announced. "But it's outside." We all bundled up in coats and followed him to the circular driveway. That's when I saw it. A brand new Lexus LX 600, gleaming white under the pale winter sun, wrapped with an enormous gold bow that must have cost a fortune by itself. The luxury SUV sat there like a monument to everything wrong with my family. Ashley screamed and jumped up and down like she was 18 instead of 32. She threw her arms around our parents while Tyler took photos for her Instagram. The SUV cost $117,000. I knew because I'd helped my father review his financial statements 3 months ago when he'd asked me to look over some investments. I'd seen the payment authorization for the vehicle and assumed it was for him. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd provided free financial consulting to my own father so he could budget for a 6-figure gift for my sister while I got a clearance mug. "This is too much," Ashley gushed, though we all knew she believed she deserved every penny. "I can't believe you did this." Lorraine beamed with maternal pride. "You've worked so hard on your business, sweetheart. You deserve something special." The business they'd funded. The business where Ashley worked maybe 20 hours a week while I clocked 60 and could barely afford my studio apartment's rent increase. I stood there in the cold, watching this scene unfold, and felt 30 years of accumulated disappointment crystallize into something harder and sharper. My mother turned to me then, perhaps noticing my silence. "Don't look so glum, dear," she said in that patronizing tone I'd heard my entire life. Be grateful for what you have. Life is fair in its own way. Ashley needs the SUV for her business. You have that reliable Honda. Life is fair. Those 3 words ricocheted through my brain like bullets. Life is fair. My 10-year-old Honda Civic with 140,000 miles and a check engine light that came on every other week was apparently equivalent to a luxury vehicle worth more than 2 years of my salary. Something inside me snapped cleanly in half. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things while Ashley took 1,000 photos with her new toy. We went back inside for the elaborate Christmas brunch that Lorraine had catered because she didn't believe in cooking for large gatherings. I ate my eggs Benedict and made small talk and laughed at my father's jokes. But inside, I was planning. The meal dragged on for hours. Ashley wouldn't stop talking about the Lexus, about all the trips she and Tyler would take, about how perfect it was. Lorraine kept looking at me expectantly, as if waiting for me to express more gratitude for my $5 mug. You seem quiet today, my mother finally said during dessert. Is everything all right? I wanted to laugh. Everything was spectacularly not all right, but I'd learned long ago that expressing my feelings to these people was pointless. They'd gaslight me into believing I was being dramatic or ungrateful. They'd tell me I was jealous or immature. Just tired from the drive, I said instead. The roads were pretty bad. Kenneth barely looked up from his phone. You should have left earlier. Planning ahead is important, you know. Rich advice from a man who'd never had to worry about anything in his entire privileged life. The day continued in the same vein. Ashley and Tyler went for a drive in the new Lexus. My parents talked about their upcoming cruise to the Mediterranean. I sat in the corner of the living room, holding my stupid mug, and let my anger simmer into something productive. By evening, the house had settled into its usual rhythm. Ashley and Tyler retreated to the guest house. My parents went to bed early, exhausted from the excitement of spoiling their favorite child. I was supposed to drive back to Boston that night, but I told them I was too tired and would leave first thing in the morning. Instead, I waited. At midnight, the house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I crept downstairs to my father's home office, the one room in the house I'd spent countless hours in during high school when he'd occasionally pretend to take interest in teaching me about business. I knew where he kept everything. The man was brilliant with investments but terrible with personal security. His filing cabinets weren't even locked. I found what I was looking for in less than 20 minutes. My father's will, updated just 6 months ago, laid out exactly what I'd suspected. Upon his and Lorraine's deaths, Ashley would inherit 75% of the estate. I would receive 25%. The reasoning, spelled out in black and white, was that Ashley required more support to maintain her lifestyle while I had proven capable of self-sufficiency. I photographed every page with my phone. Then I found the trust documents. Ashley's trust fund, established when she was 18, had been regularly replenished over the years. My trust fund, equal in size when it was created, had been dissolved when I was 22 and the money redistributed to Ashley's account. The notation said the decision was made because I'd been difficult and ungrateful during a family argument I barely remembered. More photographs. I discovered loan documents showing my parents had given Ashley $300,000 to buy her condo in Miami, listed as a family loan with 0% interest and no repayment schedule. I'd asked for help with a down payment on a modest condo 2 years ago and been told they didn't believe in enabling dependence. The photographs kept piling up. But then I found something that made my hands shake with rage. Tucked in the back of a drawer was a folder labeled College Fund Disbursements. I opened it and found spreadsheets detailing how my original college fund had been managed. When I was born, my maternal grandmother had left me $50,000 specifically for education. The account had grown to nearly $75,000 by the time I was 18. My parents had withdrawn it all when I was a sophomore in college. The notation said redistributed to family operational expenses. I remembered that year vividly because that was when they'd bought the guest house property and renovated it into the luxury accommodation where Ashley now stayed. They'd stolen my grandmother's gift to me and used it to expand their estate. I sat on the floor of my father's office and felt tears sliding down my face. Not tears of sadness, but a fury so pure it almost felt cleansing. Every time I'd struggled to pay tuition, every time I'd worked double shifts at the campus library, every time I'd eaten ramen for dinner to save money, they'd been living off funds that were meant for me. My grandmother had died when I was 12. She'd been the only person in the family who'd treated me and Ashley equally. I remembered her taking me aside during one visit and telling me she'd made sure I'd be taken care of for college. Your parents have their ways, she said cryptically, but this money is yours alone. No matter what happens. Except it wasn't mine alone. My parents had taken it and never said a word. I found more documents that painted an even darker picture. When I was 16, I'd been in a car accident. Nothing serious, but the other driver's insurance had paid out a settlement of $15,000 for my minor injuries and the trauma. That money was supposed to go into an account for me. It never did. The check had been signed over to my parents as my guardians, and they deposited it into their general account. There was no record of it ever being transferred to me. I'd asked about that settlement money once when I was 21, thinking it might help with my student loans. My father had told me it had been used for my ongoing care and expenses during high school. What expenses? I'd worn Ashley's hand-me-downs. I'd worked part-time jobs for my own spending money. I'd taken the bus to school while Ashley drove a BMW they'd bought her for her 16th birthday. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't just favoritism or unequal treatment. This was theft. This was a systematic erasure of every financial advantage I should have had, every gift from relatives who tried to help me, every dollar that should have made my life easier. I found birthday cards from my grandfather, my mother's father, who died when I was in middle school. Each card contained a check. $25 when I was 7. $50 when I was 10. $100 when I was 13. I remembered receiving these cards, remembered my mother saying she'd keep the money safe for me in a special account. There was no special account. The checks had all been deposited into my parents' main checking account. Dozens of them over the years, from birthdays and holidays, from relatives who'd wanted to show me they cared. All of it taken. The documentation was meticulous because my father was nothing if not organized. He kept records of every cent, probably for tax purposes, never imagining his daughter would one day sit in his office and piece together the full scope of what they'd done. I calculated the total in my head. Between my grandmother's college fund, the accident settlement, the birthday money, and other smaller amounts from relatives over the years, my parents had taken approximately $140,000 that had been specifically given to me. Money that could have paid for my entire undergraduate degree. Money that could have been a down payment on a house. Money that could have changed the entire trajectory of my life. And they'd taken it all while making me feel guilty for asking for help with textbooks, investment accounts, property deeds, life insurance policies, all of it meticulously organized in my father's files. I photographed everything that showed the staggering disparity in how they treated us financially over the years. I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. Years of working as an accountant had taught me how to organize financial data in ways that told a clear story. I spent the next hour creating a comprehensive breakdown of every financial decision my parents had made regarding their two daughters over 3 decades. The numbers were staggering when laid out properly. Ashley had received approximately $2 million in direct financial support over her lifetime. This included her college tuition, her trust fund, her business capital, her condo loan, her wedding costs, her divorce settlement assistance, various vehicles, luxury vacations, and countless smaller gifts and payments. I had received approximately $67,000, most of which came in the form of birthday and Christmas gifts under $500. The largest single gift they'd ever given me was $5,000 when I graduated from college, which they'd reminded me about constantly as evidence of their generosity. But even that $67,000 number was misleading because it didn't account for what they'd stolen from me. When I factored in my grandmother's college fund, the accident settlement, and the birthday money from relatives, the real disparity became clear. Ashley had received $2 million in support. I had received negative $73,000 because they'd actually taken more from me than they'd ever given. The spreadsheet was a work of art in its own way. Color-coded categories, clear data visualization, footnotes explaining each entry. It was the kind of financial analysis I'd do for a corporate client, except this corporation was my family and the fraud was personal. I saved multiple copies to different cloud services. This documentation was insurance, evidence that could never be denied or explained away. Then I turned my attention to the rest of the office. My father's desk contained correspondence that revealed even more uncomfortable truths. Letters from Ashley asking for money, dozens of them over the years, each request granted without hesitation. There was one from just 2 months ago where she'd asked for $20,000 to cover some unexpected business expenses. My father had wired the money the same day. I found emails between my parents discussing me. One from 3 years ago caught my eye. My mother had written to my father about a phone call we'd had where I'd mentioned struggling with my car repairs. She called asking about the mechanic we use. I think she was hoping we'd offer to pay. I told her we couldn't recommend anyone. She needs to learn that money doesn't grow on trees. My father's response, good. The more we give her, the more dependent she becomes. Ashley needs us, but at least she appreciates what we do. This one just complains. This one. They'd refer to me as this one like I was a problematic pet rather than their daughter. Another email from 5 years ago showed my mother telling my father about a promotion I'd received at work. His response was a single sentence, maybe now she'll stop looking to us for handouts. I'd never asked them for handouts. I'd asked for help exactly 3 times in my adult life, once for assistance with a car down payment when I was 23, once for help with a medical bill when I was 26, and once for the condo down payment when I was 28. They'd refused all 3 requests while simultaneously funding Ashley's entire lifestyle. The emails painted a picture of 2 people who actively resented me for existing. Who saw my independence as a character flaw rather than a survival mechanism I developed because I knew I couldn't count on them. One email thread from my mother to her sister, my Aunt Patricia who lived in Rhode Island, was particularly revealing. Patricia had apparently asked why I never visited during holidays anymore. My mother's response was lengthy and detailed at every perceived slight and disappointment I'd caused over the years. She'd written that I was cold and distant, that I never showed proper appreciation, that I made everything about money. She twisted every interaction to make me the villain of the family story. The time I declined to fly to Miami for Ashley's birthday weekend became evidence that I was jealous and unsupportive. The time I'd said I couldn't afford to attend a family vacation to Europe became proof that I always had excuses. The time I'd quietly declined to contribute to an expensive group gift for my parents' anniversary because I was between jobs became an example of my selfishness. Never mind that Ashley had never once visited me in Boston. Never mind that the Europe vacation cost more than I made in 3 months. Never mind that I'd been laid off and was surviving on unemployment benefits when they'd asked for gift contributions. My mother had rewritten our entire family history in her emails, creating a narrative where Ashley was the devoted daughter who deserved everything, and I was the problem child who deserved nothing. I photographed those emails too. By the time I finished documenting everything, I had over 300 photos stored on my phone and backed up to multiple locations. I had evidence of financial theft, parental favoritism taken to illegal extremes, and written proof that my parents actively disliked me while pretending to be disappointed by my distance. The house remained silent around me. Somewhere above, my parents slept peacefully, completely unaware that their daughter was dismantling their carefully constructed facade one photograph at a time. I thought about confronting them in the morning. I imagined walking into their bedroom, throwing the printed documentation on their bed, and demanding answers. I played out the scene in my head: my father's red face, my mother's denials, Ashley's tears. But what would be the point? People like them didn't change when confronted with evidence of their wrongdoing. They doubled down. They gaslit. They made you feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of your face. No, confrontation would be wasted on them. They'd find a way to twist it, to make me the bad guy once again. They'd probably threaten me with legal action for going through my father's office, conveniently ignoring the fact that they'd literally stolen money that had been given to me as a child. I needed something better than confrontation. I needed something that would make them feel even a fraction of the humiliation they'd put me through over 30 years. At 2 a.m, I went out to the driveway where the Lexus sat under the security lights. The gold bow had been removed but still lay in the back seat. I took out the supplies I'd brought in my backpack and got to work. I didn't damage the vehicle. I'm not a vandal, and I didn't want to do anything illegal. Instead, I spent 30 minutes covering every inch of that SUV with post-it notes. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. I'd bought 50 packs from an office supply store on my way to Connecticut, and I'd spent my Christmas Eve writing on them while everyone else slept. Each note contained a fact. A dollar amount. A comparison. Ashley's NYU tuition paid in full, $272,000. My BU financial aid, $0. Ashley's trust fund at age 25, $800,000. My trust fund at age 25, $0. Ashley's business startup capital, $500,000. My business startup capital, never asked because I knew the answer. Ashley's wedding gift, $75,000. My graduation gift, $500 gift card. This Lexus, $117,000. My mug, $5.99. Years I spent believing I wasn't good enough, 30. Years it took me to realize I was never the problem, 30. I covered every window, every panel, every surface I could reach. The SUV became a monument to my parents' favoritism, a rolling spreadsheet of their failures as parents. On the windshield, in the center where it couldn't be missed, I placed my final note. This one I'd written with special care, using a gold marker to match the bow they'd chosen. Dear Ashley, Mom, and Dad, consider this my resignation from the position of family scapegoat. I will no longer be attending holidays, answering calls, or pretending that this is normal. I will not be returning the $5.99 mug as I've donated it to Goodwill where it might actually bring someone joy. Life is fair? You're about to find out how fair it can be. Love and goodbye, your daughter and sister who finally knows her worth. I took photos of my artwork, then walked to my car and drove away. The roads were empty at that hour, just me and the night and the incredible lightness that comes from finally letting go of people who never deserved your love in the first place. I didn't turn my phone on until I was back in Boston at 8 a.m. The messages started loading immediately. 43 missed calls. 67 text messages. 3 voicemails. My mother's voice came through first, high-pitched with fury. What have you done? Get back here right now and clean up this mess. This is childish and disgraceful. My father's message was colder. This kind of behavior is exactly why you've never gotten the same treatment as your sister. You're jealous and spiteful. Don't bother coming back. Ashley's text simply said, seriously? Grow up. But there was one message that made it all worthwhile. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister who'd always been the black sheep of the family, sent me a photo. Someone had clearly called her to complain, and she'd driven over to see the spectacle herself. The photo showed the Lexus in full daylight, covered in my post-it notes like some kind of art installation. Neighbors had gathered in the street to look. Ashley stood beside it with her face red from crying or anger or both. My mother appeared to be yelling at someone, probably the security company for not preventing this breach. Patricia's message said, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Come to dinner next week. We have a lot to talk about." The calls and messages continued throughout the day. My parents' friends started reaching out, having heard about the incident through the wealthy person's grapevine that spreads gossip faster than wildfire. Some were appalled at my behavior. Others, surprisingly, reached out with support. Mrs. Vanessa Hartley, who'd known me since childhood, sent a message that made me cry. "I've watched your parents treat you differently for years and it broke my heart. Good for you for finally standing up for yourself. You deserved better." By afternoon, the story had somehow made it to social media. Someone in the neighborhood had taken photos and posted them online. The post-it note incident went viral in Connecticut circles. People were divided. Some thought I was cruel and vindictive. Others thought I was a hero calling out parental favoritism. A local news station even contacted me for comment, which I politely declined. My phone buzzed with a notification from LinkedIn. Several colleagues from my firm had apparently seen the story circulating and were messaging me to ask if I was okay. Word was spreading through professional networks faster than I'd anticipated. I composed a brief, professional response explaining that I was handling a private family matter and appreciated their concern. But then something unexpected happened. An executive from one of our client companies, a woman named Diana who I'd worked with on a complex merger, sent me a private message that made me pause. "I saw what you did with the post-it notes. My parents did something similar to me and my brother growing up. It took me until I was 40 to cut them off. You're brave for doing it now. If you ever need someone to talk to who understands, I'm here." More messages like that followed over the next few hours. People I'd known professionally but never personally started sharing their own stories of family dysfunction and financial favoritism. It was like my public act of rebellion had given others permission to acknowledge their own experiences. A former classmate from Boston University reached out with a message that brought tears to my eyes. "I remember you working 3 jobs during senior year while talking about how your sister got everything handed to her. I always wondered why you stayed in touch with them. I'm glad you finally put yourself first." The validation from near strangers was overwhelming in the best possible way. For years, I'd wondered if maybe I was being too sensitive, if maybe my parents were right and I was just ungrateful. Seeing dozens of people recognize the dysfunction for what it was helped silence that doubt. The comment section on the viral post was a battlefield. Some people defended my parents, saying that successful people had the right to distribute their wealth however they wanted. Others pointed out that treating children so drastically differently wasn't about wealth distribution but about basic respect and fairness. One comment stuck with me: "Money isn't the issue here. It's what the money represents." This family told one daughter she was worth a Lexus and told the other daughter she was worth $5. That's not parenting. That's cruelty with a bow on top. Exactly. That person understood it perfectly. My inbox filled with interview requests from local publications, bloggers who covered family dynamics, even a producer from a daytime talk show who wanted to discuss holiday family drama on air. I declined everything. This wasn't about fame or attention. This was about finally being honest about what my family had done. But I did accept one call, from a journalist named Marcus at a Connecticut lifestyle magazine. He wasn't interested in sensationalizing the story. Instead, he wanted to write a piece about wealth and parenting, about how financial privilege could damage family relationships when wielded irresponsibly. "I won't use your real name," he promised. "But your story represents something a lot of people experience but never talk about. The children of wealthy parents who use money as a weapon. Would you be willing to speak with me off the record?" I agreed, and we spent an hour on the phone discussing not just my experience but the broader implications. Marcus had clearly done his research. He talked about studies showing that extreme favoritism in wealthy families often led to estrangement, mental health issues, and cycles of dysfunction that repeated across generations. "Your sister probably isn't happy either," he said at one point. Children who receive everything often struggle with their own issues. No sense of accomplishment, fear that they're only valued for what they can extract from their parents, inability to function independently. "You got the short end financially, but she got the short end developmentally." I'd never thought about it that way. Ashley had always seemed so confident, so secure in her position as the favored child. But now I remembered moments when that confidence had slipped. The time she drunkenly confessed at her first wedding that she worried Tyler only wanted her for her money. The time she'd started her design business and then panicked after 2 weeks, saying she couldn't do it, that she needed Dad's help with everything. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe neither of us had been parented well, just in different ways. The real surprise came 3 days later. I received an email from Ashley. Not a text, not a call, but a formal email like we were business associates instead of sisters. I spent 2 hours removing all those notes from my car. Some of the adhesive damaged the paint. "I hope you're happy with yourself. You've always been jealous of me, but this crossed a line. Mom and Dad are devastated. You've embarrassed them in front of everyone they know. Don't expect to be welcome at any family events going forward. I read it twice and felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no regret, no sadness. Just peace. I wrote back, Ashley, I helped Dad with his financial statements in September. I saw the payment authorization for your Lexus. I provided him with free professional services while he planned to give you a six-figure gift and me a clearance mug. The paint damage sounds like something your business insurance should cover, or perhaps Mom and Dad can help since they're so generous with you. Regarding family events, don't worry. I've already made other plans for the rest of my life. Take care. I didn't hear back. Aunt Patricia and I had dinner the following week at a small Italian restaurant in Boston. She'd always been the family outsider, the one who'd refused to play by my parents' rules. She'd married for love instead of money, worked as a social worker instead of joining the family business, and lived in a modest house in Rhode Island instead of a mansion in Connecticut. Your mother called me 7 times yesterday, Patricia said over wine and pasta. She wants me to convince you to apologize. I raised an eyebrow. And what did you tell her? I told her she should be apologizing to you for 30 years of emotional abuse disguised as parenting. Patricia smiled. She hung up on me. I don't think we'll be invited to Easter this year. We laughed about that, and it felt good. Cleansing. I should have done something years ago, Patricia said, her expression turning serious. I watched them treat you differently and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. I'm sorry for that. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're doing something now. That's what matters. Patricia became my family after that. Real family, the kind that shows up and cares and doesn't measure your worth in dollar signs. She introduced me to her circle of friends, people who'd built their lives through hard work and genuine relationships rather than inherited wealth and social climbing. 3 weeks after Christmas, I received a letter from an attorney. My parents were threatening to sue me for defamation and emotional distress. The letter outlined their grievances, including damage to Ashley's vehicle and harm to their reputation in the community. I called Patricia, who connected me with her friend Gregory, an attorney who specialized in family law. We met in his office overlooking Boston Harbor. Do they have a case? I asked after explaining the situation. Gregory reviewed the threatening letter and laughed. They could try, but it would be laughed out of court. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation. Were the facts you wrote on those post-it notes accurate? Every single one. I have documentation to prove it. Then they have nothing. This letter is meant to intimidate you into apologizing and maintaining their facade of family harmony. He leaned back in his chair. The question is, what do you want to do? I thought about it for a moment. I want to be left alone. I want them to stop calling and texting and having their friends reach out to me. I can make that happen, Gregory said. I'll draft a response making it clear that any further contact will constitute harassment. I'll also mention that you're prepared to share your documentation of financial disparities if they continue threatening legal action. That should quiet things down. It did. Gregory sent his letter, and the call stopped. The silence was deafening at first. 30 years of dysfunction doesn't end without leaving some scars. I found myself reaching for my phone to call my mother about something small, then remembering I'd severed that connection. But the freedom that came with the silence was intoxicating. The first few weeks were the hardest. I'd wake up with anxiety churning in my stomach, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. Cutting off your family isn't something society prepares you for or supports. Even people who intellectually understood why I'd done it would say things like, but they're your parents or maybe you should give them another chance. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Morrison, who specialized in family estrangement. Her office was a calm space with soft lighting and comfortable chairs that didn't feel clinical. During our first session, I unloaded everything: the Lexus, the mug, the stolen money, the emails, 3 decades of being made to feel worthless. Dr. Morrison listened without judgment and then said something that shifted my entire perspective. You didn't cut off your family. Your family cut you off emotionally years ago. You just made it official. She helped me understand that what I was grieving wasn't the loss of my actual parents, but the loss of the parents I'd always hoped they would become. I was mourning a fantasy, not a reality. The real Kenneth and Lorraine had shown me exactly who they were countless times. I just kept hoping they'd change. Children are biologically programmed to seek parental approval, Dr. Morrison explained during one session. It's a survival mechanism. But as adults, we have the ability to recognize when that seeking is damaging us, and to choose differently. What you did with those post-it notes wasn't revenge. It was truth-telling. You made visible what had been invisible for your entire life. The therapy helped, but so did the practical aspects of building a new life. I joined a gym and started working out regularly, channeling my anger and grief into something productive. I reconnected with college friends I'd lost touch with over the years because I'd been too embarrassed to explain my family situation. One friend, Michelle, invited me to her place for dinner and introduced me to her wife and kids. We'd been close during our junior year but had drifted apart after graduation. Over wine and homemade lasagna, I found myself telling her everything. I remember meeting your parents once, Michelle said. It was at that awards ceremony when you got the Academic Achievement Prize. Your mom spent the whole reception talking about how your sister was dating some investment banker. She barely acknowledged your award. I'd forgotten about that night, but Michelle's memory brought it flooding back. I'd been so proud of that prize, a recognition given to only 3 students in the entire business school. My parents had attended the ceremony but left immediately after, saying they had dinner reservations they couldn't miss. Those reservations were with Ashley and her boyfriend of the month. I remember thinking your family dynamic was weird, Michelle continued. But I was 21 and didn't have the language for it. Now I'm a mom, and I can't imagine treating one of my kids the way your parents treated you. It's actually abusive. Hearing someone use that word, abusive, in relation to my childhood was jarring. I'd always thought abuse meant physical violence or screaming matches. But Dr. Morrison had explained that financial abuse was real, that emotional neglect was real, that systematic favoritism was real. My parents had abused me in ways that didn't leave visible bruises but had damaged me just as thoroughly. Michelle and her wife became part of my support system. So did several other friends who emerged once I was honest about what I'd been dealing with. It turned out that lots of people had problematic family situations. I'd just been too ashamed to talk about mine before. Work became a refuge in those early months. The firm's culture was demanding but fair, and I appreciated having clear metrics for success that had nothing to do with who loved me more. My performance reviews were based on the quality of my work, not on whether I fit some arbitrary standard of what a daughter should be. I threw myself into my work and discovered I was actually quite good at it when I wasn't constantly drained by family drama. My boss noticed the change and recommended me for a position at a larger firm in downtown Boston. The interview process was intense, but I landed the job with a 40% salary increase. For the first time in my life, I could afford to live comfortably. I moved into a better apartment in Cambridge with a view of the river. I bought furniture that wasn't secondhand. I treated myself to nice dinners and weekend trips without drowning in guilt about spending money on myself. Spring came and went. Summer arrived with warm days and the kind of contentment I'd never thought possible. Patricia and I had standing dinner dates every other week. I made new friends through work and through a book club I joined. My life filled up with people who actually cared about me. In August, I received a wedding invitation. Ashley was marrying Tyler in a ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. The invitation was addressed to me alone, no +1 offered. A small card included inside said, "We hope you can put aside past differences to celebrate this special day." I held the invitation for a long time, feeling the weight of the olive branch they were extending. Part of me wondered if I should go, if maybe this was a chance to rebuild something. Then I remembered the $5 mug. I remembered the Lexus. I remembered every single time they'd made me feel like I wasn't enough. I sent back the RSVP card with regretfully declines checked and no explanation attached. Patricia texted me later that week. "Lorraine called to complain that you're not going to the wedding. She said you're being petty." "What did you tell her?" "I told her pettiness is giving one daughter a Lexus and the other a clearance mug. Then I told her I wouldn't be attending either. We're going to Portland that weekend instead. You interested?" I was very interested. We spent Ashley's wedding weekend exploring Portland, eating incredible food and laughing about how much better life was outside the toxic bubble of my family. Patricia showed me photos that a mutual friend had sent from the wedding. It looked beautiful and expensive and everything Ashley had ever wanted. I felt nothing but relief that I wasn't there. Autumn brought unexpected developments. My new firm had a client in Hartford who needed extensive financial restructuring. When I saw the company name on the file, my blood ran cold. It was one of my father's major holdings, a commercial property management company that controlled several of his most valuable assets. My supervisor asked me to lead the consultation. I should have recused myself, explained the conflict of interest. Instead, I accepted the assignment. The company was a mess. Years of mismanagement, nepotism, and poor financial decisions had left it teetering on the edge of serious trouble. The audit revealed problems that could have been avoided with basic oversight. I did my job thoroughly and professionally, documenting everything. My report was damning but accurate. The recommendations I provided would help the company survive, but implementation would require major changes, including the removal of several executives who happened to be my father's friends and business school buddies. When the client received my analysis, they immediately scheduled a meeting with Kenneth. I wasn't present for that conversation, but I heard through professional channels that he was furious when he realized his daughter had been the one to expose the problems in his organization. He tried to have me fired. He called my firm's managing partner and demanded I be removed from the case for bias. The managing partner, a woman named Ruth who'd built her career on integrity, reviewed my work and found it flawless. She told my father that if he continued to interfere with his daughter's professional conduct, she'd consider it harassment and report him to the relevant authorities. The case proceeded. The company implemented my recommendations. Several of my father's friends lost their cushy executive positions. The company survived and eventually thrived, which meant my professional reputation grew even stronger. Kenneth never spoke to me again after that, which was fine by me. Christmas rolled around again, and I spent it with Patricia and her family in Rhode Island. We cooked dinner together, exchanged modest gifts that came from the heart, and watched old movies by the fireplace. It was the best holiday I'd ever experienced. Do you ever regret it? Patricia asked me late that night. Walking away from all that money? I thought about the trust funds and inheritances and the wealth I'd never receive. Not even a little bit. I'd rather have nothing and be free than have everything and be trapped. She hugged me tight. You're going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. She was right. The years passed and my life continued to improve in ways I couldn't have imagined. I made partner at my firm before I turned 35. I bought a small condo in Brookline that I furnished exactly how I wanted. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed about, funding every trip with money I'd earned myself. I heard about my family occasionally through Patricia or mutual acquaintances. Ashley's marriage to Tyler lasted 3 years before ending in a messy divorce. My parents' health declined, though they remained wealthy and bitter. The society circles they cared so much about moved on to new scandals and new gossip. None of it touched me anymore. 5 years after the Christmas incident, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Ashley. I've been in therapy for a year now. My therapist helped me see how toxic our family dynamic was. I'm working on taking accountability for my part in how things went. I don't expect you to forgive me or want a relationship. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. You were right. Life wasn't fair. I'm sorry for my role in that. I read the message several times, looking for the catch or the manipulation. But it seemed genuine, raw in a way Ashley had never been before. I wrote back, "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know. I hope therapy continues to help you. I'm doing well, and I wish the same for you. Take care of yourself." We didn't become close after that. Too much damage had been done, too many years had passed. But there was a kind of peace in knowing that maybe, somewhere deep down, my sister had finally understood what she'd been part of. Looking back now, I see that Christmas morning as the best gift I ever received. Not the $5 mug, but the clarity it brought. Sometimes you need one final, perfect example of how little you matter to people to finally give yourself permission to walk away. That Lexus covered in post-it notes was my declaration of independence. It was me finally saying that I deserved better, that I was worth more than their scraps and their conditional love. The $5 mug is long gone, donated to a thrift store where maybe it brought someone a moment of joy. But the freedom I claimed that night lives on, growing stronger with each year that passes. Life is fair, my mother had said. She was wrong. Life isn't fair. But we can choose how we respond to that unfairness. We can choose to stop accepting less than we deserve. We can choose to walk away from people who diminish us, even when those people share our DNA. I chose myself that Christmas. And every day since then, I've continued making that same choice. It's the best decision I ever made.